Well, as people pile in, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started, being that I want to give us as much time as possible for Q&A and just like conversation and dialogue. So if you don't know me, hi everyone. My name is Tillery Johnson. I use she, they pronouns, and I am Next Gen America's People Experience Manager. I have the honor of welcoming you all to our Juneteenth Town Hall. We are so very excited to host today's discussion, joined by our partners to explore what Juneteenth means to communities in this current moment and the importance of young Black voters and voter access. First, a little bit more about Next Gen America. Our mission is to empower young voters ages 18 to 35 to engage in the political process and ensure our government is responsive to the largest and most diverse generation in American history. This mission is more salient than ever, as in this year's election, approximately 14% of the Gen Z electorate are Black. NextGen's work aims to make a government that reflects us, represents us, and respects us, and today's Juneteenth panel is a celebration of this pursuit. Black communities' voting rights are and have historically been under attack through racial gerrymandering and voter suppression. So today's panel centers Black voices and will examine the importance of our work and the work of our partners to create a more equitable future for all. All that said, I am so very excited to welcome today's panelists. Please rise when you hear your name. I'm just joking. You don't got to do that. Jasiri X, artist and activist of One Hood Media. Tiyale Hayes, Executive Vice President of Insights and Multiplatform Analytics at BET. Wisdom Cole, Senior National Director of Advocacy at NAACP. I'm thinking of like sports. Joe Paul, Executive Director of Black Men Vote, and Kimberly Hayes, member of the National Social Action Commission, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Please give a warm virtual applause as I hand it off to Jasiri to kick off the conversation. Thank you.
Peace. Thank you so much. And, we're honored to be here and have this conversation. I think particularly like, as Juneteenth kind of have went from something that was like insular to something that, now is a national holiday and nationally recognized. We wanted to start with just a conversation about what does Juneteenth mean to us and kind of how it's changed. I represent an organization called One Hood Media. We're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're an organization that does a lot of community organizing using art, using hip hop culture. We have 5 pillars in our organization, which is art, media, education, civic engagement, and what we call cultural organizing. And so we do an event every year around Juneteenth. We've been doing it for the last 3 years in Pittsburgh. We do it in collaboration with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and we have 15 visual artists, Black visual artists actually inside of the Pirate Stadium. We're doing it next Tuesday. But again, I think this is new. To me, when I think about Juneteenth, I think about, it always makes me think about just as our community, like where are we in terms of our freedom and our liberation? At One Hood, our mission is to build liberated communities through art, education, and social justice. So it always makes me think of what does a liberated community mean? How are we working towards our own collective liberation and building power? And I think for us, in terms of this conversation, one of the tools that we use to build power in our community is civic engagement and voting. We were able to get involved as an organization in civic engagement in 2019, where we got involved in our local DA race. Well, we did not win that race, but we made enough of an impact to say, okay, this is something we want to get involved in. In 2020, Pennsylvania decided the election. So I always tell people you're welcome. We had a lot to do with that. In 2021, in Pittsburgh, we were able to elect the first Black mayor in the history of Pittsburgh, Mayor Ed Gainey. In 2022, we were able to elect the first Black Congresswoman in Pennsylvania history in Summer Lee, who just won the primary again this year. And in 2023, our civic engagement director, Kari Mosley, became my city councilman. And so for us, I think about like, how are we looking at liberation? What are we doing and organize to build power in our communities? And how is that power leading to us becoming more free and having the access that we need to have as we're seeing, DI be attacked, as we're seeing our voting rights be attacked, as we're seeing, all of these other things kind of happen concurrently in our communities. And so for me, Juneteenth is another kind of a point for us to organize around and have these conversations around what does our collective liberation mean and how we're moving towards it. So I'm going to pass it on to my brother Wisdom, and you could take it from here and talk about, what does Juneteenth mean to you and how we're using Juneteenth to kind of build this collective future.
Appreciate it, Brother Jasiri. Great to be a part of this conversation. Thank you so much, Next Gen, for having me join. I think it's really important for us to really kind of center the purpose of Juneteenth in this moment in time. To some of the points that Jasiri made. Growing up, I'm from California. Didn't really celebrate Juneteenth growing up until I went to college and kind of understanding it from that perspective. But also traveling out of the state of California and getting into Texas and actually going to visit Galveston and learning the history in real time, right? Visiting the museum down there, engaging with the locals, understanding how important Juneteenth has been and meant to our community for quite some time. And so, we were ecstatic for it to become a federal holiday. But it has to be more than just a federal holiday, right? We acknowledge it as Freedom Day. But for me, and for the young people and the folks that I work with across this nation, it really has to be a call to action, right? It has to be an opportunity to galvanize our generation to do more in terms of the fight for freedom, right? As Jasiri pointed out, there are multiple attacks happening across this nation on diversity, equity, inclusion. Young people are standing up, they're protesting, they're exercising their rights and being shot down. And so we have to recognize that freedom isn't free unless it's freedom for all of us. And so I really want to make sure that we take this moment as an opportunity to challenge us to do more. We are getting ready for an election that we consistently say time and time again is the most important election of our lifetime. And so I think it's absolutely important that we recognize the issues that are most important to young people in our nation, issues around foreign policy, issues around climate justice, issues of educational equity, gun violence, police violence, state violence. These are all things that we are currently living with in our world. And something that I like to reiterate to my young people is that we need a new deal. We need to see something that is an opportunity for us to not only survive in America, but to truly thrive. And so part of that is making sure that we are equipping young people with the tactics and tools to get out the message. Over the past 4 years, right, young people have changed up our organizing style or changed up our organizing flow. Things have been highly digitized. We've formed a lot of digital connections. We've spent a lot of time on social media. And part of what we have to do now is reconnect, right? Take some of the tools that we've learned over the last 4 years, but also use some of the classic tried and true ways in which we connect with people in person. We got to get outside. I love the fact that it is shaping up to be a beautiful summer, but it's also going to be, again, one of the hottest summers ever. And so we are seeing some of the real concerns that we have happen manifest in that way. And so part of what that looks like when we're talking about voting is making sure that young people are aware of voter education initiatives. Oftentimes where we have been asked this question about why young people are not voting or engaged in this way or that way. But I really urge people to take a step back and start from the beginning in terms of our folks educated about the process, our folks understanding how to actually register themselves to vote, where they're going to actually register, what jurisdictions, making sure that they are also utilizing technology and social media. How do we form effective partnerships and collaboration? Because we know we can't do this work by ourselves. We need to make sure that we are working with those who we are in the struggle together with. But also, how are we mobilizing to the polls, right? I think part of it is recognizing that the fight doesn't just die with the protests. We have to carry it all the way through and take it to the polls. And so when I think of Juneteenth, when I think of the work that we're doing, I think that it really has to all come together in really re-envisioning what the future of this world can look like for young people.
No, thank you for that, Wisdom. That was such a great point. Even thinking about, being back outside in 2020, we had to be digital in many ways, but we're back outside, like you said, still facing, a climate crisis, still facing, a pandemic in many ways. And like, how are we working towards that? I want to pass it to Tiyale. What does Juneteenth mean to you? And like, where do you see this current moment that we're in collectively?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm excited to be here, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about my roots in Juneteenth and where I first got exposed. I think since it's such a newly federally recognized space, that it's important for us to remember, like, where were you when? And so two of us on the phone, at least two of us that I'm aware of, went to the illustrious Hampton University. And I was first introduced to the idea of proclamations with one of our landmarks on campus called the Emancipation Oak. And Emancipation Oak is where the Emancipation Proclamation was read to the slaves in the Tidewater area. And so we have made that a national landmark at our school, and it's a big part of our university history because it really stems on a college dedicated to Black academia and Black success. It links to the constant threat that we have in our community of misinformation, right? And Juneteenth nationally is really about this idea of right-sizing misinformation, that and giving people and making sure that we are aware that we are free so we can walk in that full freedom. And so as that was how I first started learning about the impact of Juneteenth. I think as an adult now, and in this social impact work that we do, the pervasiveness and the prevalence of misinformation is something that I find deeply troubling. And so as I think about our work at BET being the #1 network amongst Black viewers in the television space, it becomes important for us to be very thoughtful about how we amplify messaging and how we helping to create messaging. And so some of the things that we've been doing to really help support this work this year is we created our own national poll. So we said, hey, let us be in charge of our data. So versus us kind of believing what someone's telling us, we've created our own national poll where we are out talking to Black people every 2 weeks, getting new information on what are the issues that are pertinent. And we offer that as a gift out to our partner organizations or to anyone who's interested. And so we don't charge for it. We fund it fully as a network because we believe that information is power. Because if we know, in this case, where young people's real issues are, where are the issues, and not just what we're hearing on the news or what people are telling you the issue should be, what are the real issues that are impacting our people, we can really address those. And so Insights really sets at the core of how we try to really give that current information. And the second piece that we're doing around is Black men. So we know, everyone on the call knows that there's a very clear campaign, both foreign and domestic led, of misinformation amongst Black men. And so we have been very thoughtful this year and I'm not going to steal my brother's thunder on talking about diversity inside the Black male space, but we are committed to ensuring that we are not see Black men as a monolith. Because obviously, I'll use this example, an 18-year-old young Black man in Harlem is living a very different experience than an 18-year-old young Black man in Montgomery, Alabama, which is also very different than a 50-year-old Black man in Philadelphia. So we want to be really thoughtful and respectful that we don't get really lazy in our stereotypes about how we as a people show up and really bring diversity in. So we've created these six archetypes that create the Black male spectrum. And again, we give these insights out as gifts to the industry so that we can be really thoughtful about how we are all showing up. Because for us, the idea that BET exists to advance 4 things. We exist as a brand to advance Black love, Black joy, Black power, and Black pride. And for us, Juneteenth sits across all 4 of those, and it's a unique holiday that really allows us to express fully all 4 of those in a really unique way. So we are really excited about how we can leverage this moment of Juneteenth to put some fuel in the back of our community as we all go out to drive more civic engagement, but do it with information that we can trust, do it with the right information, and do it with the right ambition to really help solve some of the actual problems that we have.
Thank you so much, Tiyale. And I'm bringing that misinformation up, particularly, I mean, we have misinformation coming from the established candidates themselves. And so being able to get the right information, even about the holiday, Juneteenth, is super important. So thank you for the great work that you're doing over at BET. I want to pass it to Kimberly Hayes. What's been your Juneteenth experience, and how are you looking at, what we've done in the past and what we can do in the future?
Thank you for having me as well. My Juneteenth experience has always been Juneteenth being a celebration of our freedom, being a space for us to just explore and revel in that freedom for those that may not have felt included for Independence Day or July 4th celebrations. It was kind of like our own holiday where we can celebrate that. And I grew up going to like Juneteenth parades in a town that I grew up in, a college town that was semi-segregated, even though things have progressed, but it was always something to look forward to. And though Juneteenth has become a more nationally recognized holiday, definitely federal holiday, and just coming to the consciousness of people outside of our direct community, there have been a lot of conversations around what Juneteenth is, what does it mean? And I personally have a new found love for Juneteenth after traveling to Ghana last year with Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, because we were able to just really take in the experiences of being on the continent and then coming back and just really re-energizing that freedom. And then just trying to appreciate the freedom that we have, and knowing that we do also have a responsibility to keep that freedom, which is where, voting comes in, and being responsible for, for our fate, meaning that we need to mobilize, we need to vote. We cannot have a voice if we do not do that, and, make that known for everyone. So as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, social action is a part of our DNA. It's one of the founding tenets of the sorority. And so voting comes with that, voter education, always an opportunity to make people aware. So we stress voting, voter education every chance we get. All politics are local, so we make sure that every time there's a chance to register voters or educate people about voting, that we do that. We say you need to vote in every election. You need to vote for dog catcher. You need to vote for sheriff. Any election, because that's going to affect our livelihood. And I think that the more that we know and the more aware that we are, we can help our collective circumstance as Black people and as voters. So I think that Juneteenth is another opportunity for us to, revel in what we've known freedom to be and what it could look like. Because as someone said earlier, it seems like every election is even more critical. Every 4 years we hear this is the most important election of our lives, but it truly gets that way. We've seen, Roe versus Wade overturned after 50 years of being comfortable thinking that things can't change. So all of the progress that has gone into us having another freedom is being taken away from us. And we want to ensure that that doesn't happen. I mean, even the Voting Rights Act has been threatened. So we need to continue to enjoy our freedom, but know that it is our responsibility to continue to work for freedom, because we're not free until everybody's free.
Thank you so much for that, Kimberly. And also thank you for kind of lifting up the local elections, right? And the importance of also getting involved locally and making sure that as we're thinking what the national policies are, what are our local policies and how are we involved? Tiyale had brought up kind of Black men's and this kind of, attack on Black men and voting. We want to bring on Joe Paul. Joe, how have you been engaging Juneteenth, and kind of how do you see the current work that you do intersecting with, this quest for liberation for our community?
Well, thank you so much for the great question, and shout out to everyone who's in Greekdom. I happen to be an Alpha, proud Alpha man, and my wife is a Delta, so but shout out to all the other groups as well. I just want to say I'm Joe Paul. I'm executive director of Black Men Vote, and it's really exciting to be here with such an incredibly talented group. Shout out to Next Gen America for putting this on. And as we talk about Juneteenth, a couple of stats I want to at least start off with. In 2020, we had 63% of eligible Black voters show up to vote. That's major, 63%. And it's obviously a big jump from 2016, highlighting our community's growing political engagement. And we're seeing some downticks as you hear people say, vote for the crook, vote for the coward, or vote for the couch, which is insane. We look at youth engagement with young Black voters ages 18 to 29, which had a turnout rate of over 53% in 2020, and it's likely going to rise in 2024. And they're playing a crucial role in shaping our political landscape. But despite all these gains, we still have Black voters who still face significant challenges. For example, they're almost 4 times more likely than white voters to report issues with voter ID requirements and long wait times at polling stations. We typically like, you know what, I'm done. I'm going back to work, or I'm done with this. At BMV, at Black Men Vote, we focus on increasing political participation amongst Black men specifically, but among the Black community more broadly, especially the younger generation. We want to make sure that they're engaged, number one, make sure that they're informed, make sure that they're active voters who can influence, as we talk about, all politics is local. So it's not just every 4 years, it's something that you do every 6 months. And we teach folks that your voter registration card is inextricably tied to your economic development. It can mean the difference between you getting a bus stop or your trash route or transportation. I mean, it makes a hell of a difference. A key part of our strategy is our shop talks. I know many people know about our shop talk program, where we engage Black men in barbershops across the country. Right now, we're in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania for obvious reasons. These informal settings really allow brothers to discuss voting rights, and we have leveraged these barbershops as field offices, basically. And these barbers, we've trained them to be field organizers, to have meaningful conversations with their clients who they've built tremendous community trust with. So as I wrap up my comments, Juneteenth really just symbolizes our resilience and collective strength. I was living in Houston when I first found out about Juneteenth, to be honest with you, and I was like, I didn't realize that there was a portion of the country that didn't even know we were free. And trust me, nobody was going to tell them either, right? So to commemorate it and to come so far as to where we have a federal holiday is a step in the right direction. So I'm excited about the discussion and working alongside these leaders to empower Black voters.
Thank you so much, and thank everybody for their comments. And really, we're engaging Juneteenth, like you said. Like many of us have heard of Juneteenth before, but once it became a federal holiday, for a lot of people, Juneteenth is new. And for a lot of communities, a lot of these celebrations are new. I know, now in Pittsburgh, we do like a big parade. We do like this big, so I think there might be 4 or 5 different Juneteenth celebrations happening just where we are. How do you all think that how does our community look at Juneteenth now? And how are we engaging, our collective communities with this opportunity to maybe have these different conversations? We just saw a Juneteenth celebration at the White House. Do we think these things are positive and progressive, or do we think we need to maybe get down to some more nuts and bolts in terms of talking really about freedom and power in our communities? I'll pass that to whoever wants to take that question on.
I'll pop the cork off the champagne.
Let's go.
All right. So, it's really interesting. I think that you have a combination. We're steps in the right direction. A lot of times we want things fast and now, but it's about progress and not perfection, right? The fact that we have something at the White House, et cetera, that speaks to that community, right? And the folks who attended wanted to be there, and that's how they celebrate. The fact that we have festivals or backyard parties or a day off or a day of service really just shows you how we all can celebrate. Now, I do believe that we need to move into the direction of action. It can't just be a day of just celebration and we free. No, it has to be, what are some policies that we're actually going to push as a collective to make sure that whoever gets into office can respect our policies, what we stand for, what we actually want as a people. So we definitely need to shift the conversation from celebration to really action. We need to have a call to action. What are we doing? How are we doing it? How is the least among us coming along? How are policies being shaped to influence our communities and amplify our impact? How are the resources being redirected to organizations like ours so we can continue to do the work that we do on the boots on the ground as boots on the ground? So I'll pause there and would love to hear from my panel members.
I'll jump in. And I think that, Joe, what you're speaking to, you're speaking our language, because if you know a Delta, you know that we do work. And I think it parallels with MLK Day of Service, because it's a day on, not a day off. We always take the opportunity to register voters and educate. So I think that where there's a gathering of a demographic in our voting block, that we use that opportunity to register voters and to mobilize people. So I think that it is great to be in the national conversation, because that gives us an opportunity to own the narrative. And I think that it's fair for people that don't know about Juneteenth and its origins to ask us. And that gives us the opportunity to control the narrative, to say, I don't know what you've heard, but let me share this with you. And then they can go on and spread that message and continue to work and share the load of let's do positive things about it, and not just use it as, hey, I got a day off from work. We need to use that responsibility in a positive way.
Yeah, and I can jump in here too. Last year I was really struggling a lot because I'm like, how are we celebrating this when there are young people who can't even learn about the history of Juneteenth in the classroom, right? And the need for us to do more, right? This was, last summer, affirmative action was gutted. There are all these things that are being put in place to keep us from our history, to keep us from our power, that also impacts our future. But this year, really understanding the opportunity to connect, right? Like, we need each other more than ever. And so, like, I was in attendance this year at the White House celebration, and it was an awesome opportunity just to reconnect with old faces, folks that I've met in this movement. I've been in DC for about 6 years now. I've done youth organizing for the last 10 years, and to reconnect with amazing Black politicos and organizers and folks who've been doing amazing work on the ground. It truly was a celebratory moment, but also a continued call to action of, hey, we got to work together. We got to organize. We got to figure this stuff out, because when we come together, we're able to actually be in our power.
I think that I do want to bring you back in, Tiyale, into the conversation, because you had mentioned, BET's Black Male Voter Study. Were there any findings? Can you just talk about the findings? Were there anything that you felt like kind of really surprised you or was kind of shocking to you? Particularly now, as we saw in the last, particularly the last election, Black women tend to, really carry the torch in terms of like voting and voting consistently, but brothers can be a little shaky. So tell us what your findings, what your findings have found. And I'd love to hear like just some response, particularly from Joe and Kimberly and Wisdom, and those of us that are working in the civic engagement space.
I wouldn't say brothers are shaky. I would say that we have to right size the value proposition for Black men to engage in the process, and that
I love that.
And that value proposition has begun to be right sized. So I'm going to thread this connection through, right? I've been to the White House a number of times under previous administrations, and my first exposure to the White House was the Easter egg roll, and I went because, it's a thing. If you get invited, you go, because you're not going to say no to the sitting president, right? So you go. But I realized when I've taken my children down 3 of the 4 years that we went, that what that did, if nothing else, my children have photographs of themselves on the White House lawn. Like, and you sit back and you think about it. I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the optics from outside the room versus appreciating how that room was curated and what's in the room. The leap I'll make from that is I've spent my entire life in corporate, and we always talk back in the 90s about the idea that like decisions were being made on golf courses and Black people weren't generally in those conversations. That pattern hasn't changed. Decisions are made in really small private spaces, not on broad stages. Decisions are not made in town halls. My husband's a social worker. He works for the state. And we talk about these town halls, and we're like, the town halls are just a session for people to talk, and everybody sits there and listens. The votes already happened. Decisions been already made, actually. right? And so I want us to be thoughtful about us curating our ask and getting our value proposition right. And I think Black men, because we had some exposure and some exposure to people in the White House that look like us and representing our needs, we're able to start that journey. So the thing that I did learn, though, in this process is I think exactly what many people are doing some of. I think Joe's group is doing a lot of. And I think that we should follow that model for all groups, right? The thing that we learned from the study is that there were 5 kind of big findings, is that we've got to really ground Black men in their current place in politics and how voting links, because right now we can't just jump in and say vote now, but 20 years ago we didn't care about your vote, because people are like, well, wait, you didn't care 10 years ago, but now why am I so important right now? 2 is the idea of understanding how both politics and policy are going to impact their everyday lives. And I think that is something that we've gotten so lost from it. And, you know, I am thoughtful about, I want to have amazing feelings of safety nationally. I want a government that protects me so I feel good. I also want to have interactions with the police in my local town that are favorable or neutral at minimum, right? And those 2 outcomes take a lot of steps in the voting process to achieve. And I want my kids to have great schools. I want my town to get proper funding. All those things take multiple levels of voting to do versus my assumption historically, many assumptions that one check was going to solve all those problems, right? The third, and I'll go through these quickly, is seeing them as individuals versus seeing them as a collective. That's why those 6 segments that we found, all the way from like people who are hardcore Biden to hardcore Trump, and there are 4 groups in the middle of those 2. Being thoughtful about where every man stands. 2 brothers might not fall in the same space. The 5th one is, and I love this, what Brother Joe is doing now, is the idea of creating a safe space where I can participate while I'm learning. We've been so disenfranchised for so long that the idea that I'm supposed to jump in now and be an expert on foreign policy is insane to think, when many of us, unfortunately, aren't even educated properly on civics in the first place in our K-12 system. But now I'm supposed to have a doctorate in foreign policy and kind of walk into the polls fully knowledgeable of what's happening in the world. People, they want a safe space to participate while learning. And then lastly, they want to see that change in their day-to-day lives. So those are the 5 things that we got from the study. And I think I've been really trying to preach that gospel of like grounding people in. If you want to engage, and I would apply this from Black men to young people, Black women, everyone, queer men, everyone. Like, think about those 5 pieces as ways to really meet someone where they are, to get them into the process, versus this kind of hammer approach of vote because some ancestor died for us too. That message doesn't always resonate. It doesn't always. And we got to be thoughtful of what is the value proposition that person is expecting to get in exchange for their vote in the actual process.
Did you want to respond to that, Joe?
Yes, that actually definitely confirms what we're seeing on the ground. You know, we have to take a step back to understand how policies have shaped behaviors, right? And so we look at Jim Crow laws, we're looking at slavery, we're looking at Black law, we're looking at so many different laws that we're fighting against that actually influence behavior. So if you're telling me great-great-grandfather was a slave, then great-grandfather emancipated, then grandfather right to vote, then, you know, and none of them are voting throughout this process, right? Just because you have the right to vote don't mean that you're practicing, right? Because I didn't see anything change in my community before, so why should I do it? Father, right to vote, may vote, right? But the son sees that my father's been voting for 20 years, and guess what? Ain't a damn thing changed. So why should I change my behavior? Now, what we've done is educate and help brothers understand the importance of this card. It's not just about every 4 years. It's not just to choose a president. No, it's more local than that. It's in your backyard, right? It influences everything. It influences literally everything, from your sheriff to your judges to your county executive to your city council to your, everyone. And I explain it to brothers like this. I say, look, here's how your vote matters. Here's why your vote matters, right? Imagine you're in a classroom with all different kids and y'all are trying to decide how to split up jelly beans, right? You got all these jelly beans, and they can either go to the kids with the best grades, they can go to the kids with the worst grades, they can go to everybody evenly, right? Or they can go to one person, whoever has the most jelly bean access, right? Your vote will determine who gets the jelly beans. Now, you can choose not to vote, but you also have to be happy with whatever the outcome is, right? And so when you break it down to brothers that way, like, okay, so, all right, so you mean to tell me my vote means that I have a say in what happens? Yes, that's exactly what it means. That's exactly what it means, right? And so what we've done with these barbershops is create or actually leverage this safe space, right? Because all of us, the people who've been to barbershops and salons, you know that's a safe space. That's a space we go, we can talk without judgment. We can enter without any expectations. We can communicate, educate, we can love, all of that, right in that space. And so the walls are already down. And what we're doing is basically giving these barbers an additional topic, right? You already were serving lobster and steak. Here's a crab cake, right? Shout out to Maryland. Here's a crab cake that you can now serve to your clients. And so that's exactly what we're doing. And brothers it's making sense to them, right? It's making sense to them. And one of our approaches is this commit to vote approach, right? And so instead of asking, are you registered to vote? We're asking, hey, are you committed to voting? Now, I'm not talking about who you vote for. I don't even care, right? I'm just telling you about the act of voting. Can you commit to voting, right? Once you go in that booth, you make your own decision, but can you at least commit to vote? And then that will lead us to, well, I'm not registered. Fantastic. Well, here's how you do that, right? Well, I am registered. Well, I don't know if I am, et cetera. So it opens up that conversation, and it gets them to at least commit to vote. And we also extract data from that. We collect that information. We have the names, the emails, the phone number, et cetera. So we can then put them through a drip campaign where we're meaningfully communicating with them to not only just get them to register, but to get them all the way to the polls consistently.
Thank you so much for that. And just to, co-sign that in 2021, we had this unprecedented opportunity in Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is located, where we had 9 judicial openings. We were able to kind of galvanize a different groups of organizations, and we were able to get 5 progressive judges into office, all 5 women, 3 of them Black women, to become on the Allegheny Court of Common Pleas. And so, like you said, a lot of it, we're also talking about national elections, but those local elections now, when you're engaged, or if you happen to find yourself in the process where you have to go to the court, it's very different when you are looking across from somebody that has a similar lived experience than you, than somebody that maybe sees you in a different way. I want to bring you back into the conversation, Kimberly. You had mentioned, Roe v. Wade, and we know reproductive rights is something that is going to be at the forefront of where we're going in terms of the election. In your conversations with the Deltas, is that the top of the mind of Black women and the Black voters you engage with, or what are some other issues that you feel like these are the things that Black people are really concerned with, particularly the people that you're engaging?
Well, it's definitely one of the top priorities, because as women, this is also our lives and our livelihood. I think that, as my Hampton-educated brother eloquently talked about misinformation, one of the challenges that we're facing in this space that we're in now is that politics has now become pop culture. So in 2007, when social media was kind of just launching, Facebook and then Twitter later in 2009, you now have articles at the palm of your hand. You have people who never really cared about politics. Now they're interested because you have a Black man and a woman potentially taking the highest office in the land. And so now, almost 20 years later, that's just multiplied. And so we have, anybody can put out an article. This is the thing. We have to understand, like, educating and miseducating, because everybody has an opinion. And where that gets dangerous if those facts are not checked. And it happens a lot in our community. And I think it's dangerous now because nobody thought Roe could be overturned, but you're hearing this, you're reading this, not verified articles, things like that. And then you're passing off that information, and people are ill-equipped to go into the voting booth, and they're voting and they're thinking they're voting for one thing, and they don't understand, and they're voting for something else. And as a part of the strongest voting bloc and demographic as a Black woman, it is important to us that we educate and mobilize other voters, because the one thing about Black women and Deltas in particular, we are going to vote. We are going to show up. We're going to do what's right. I always take it back to the options of people like Fannie Lou Hamer. Do you think that they were pleased with their candidates? No, but they needed to do what would be progressive. They need to play the long game, which we see sometimes, you know, the far right, they play the long game. They're showing up, voting, you know, for sheriff, judge, when our community doesn't even know that this is something you can vote for. I mean, I think that it's important for us to do our civic duty. Not only is it voting, but it is also doing jury duty, signing up for jury duty. I mean, I think it was very prominent in the case of Trayvon Martin, when we saw that jury and it was not representative of his peers. And this is why, I mean, you know, people feel burdened with, I got to do jury duty, but it is our responsibility. We will make up the jury of the peers to ensure that we get fair juries. And so things like that are very important. So that's just one of the many reproductive rights are just one of the many things that are important to, you know, Deltas, Black women, because this is our livelihood. And for Black men, how they play in this role, these are your wives, your sisters, your mothers that could die during childbirth. For people that, you know, are really polarized by things like abortion, I think it's sensationalized, where it's things like having like some of the procedures that go along with an abortion may be saving someone's life. I am, you know, I may be pregnant, but I can't carry this baby to term. So it has to be what is labeled an abortion to save my life, you know, and things like that, just educating people and not to be so turned off by one word or polarized by the nature of what they think it means. It's the importance of taking the time to educate our brothers, going into those barbershops with the brothers to say, no, well, you need to, you know, understand this, and just, you know, being responsible in our conversations on social media and just sharing, just taking the time to research, you know, because people don't know, like you see a publication like, you know, say Time magazine or something like that, and they don't know that it was bought by someone else and it's not as reputable as it may have previously. So it's things like that, just believing any article you see online, you have to take the extra step to source the information before you spread it, because these are important things.
We got to do that fact check. No, thank you so much for that. So we got to get to these questions. I had a bunch of other questions, but the questions are popping off. So I'm gonna come to you. I'm gonna come to you, Wisdom, with this question. And this is from Jamila Lewis. But also, I did want to uphold, like, one of the anonymous attendees said reproductive justice is not only an issue for Black women, but also Black men and Black families. So I just want to thank you for that comment. You are 1000% right on that. Wisdom, it says, when it comes to as an organization that centers voter registration, what are some tactics that you have used to engage the general community in Juneteenth civic engagement efforts without coming off as transactional? Great question.
Absolutely great question. I really appreciate that, Jamila. You know, that is something that we're constantly being asked all the time, right? You know, it feels like a lot of these things are transactional. You know, something I talk about, I know that we are all sick of is elected officials coming into our community 2 weeks before an election, promising this, promising that, getting in office and not following through, right? You know, we've seen that script before. We've seen that play happen before. We don't want to see that happen again. And so what's really important is making sure that we are building sustainability, right? You know, something that I advise and train the young people at the NAACP is to meet people where they're at already, right? You know, be in the places and spaces that folks are already congregating, right? I appreciate Brother Joe in terms of the barbershop, right? But I'm in there every 2 weeks. Right. So like I'm gonna be at the barbershop eventually. And so, you know, finding those places and spaces that folks are already engaging with, but also making sure that you are building trust and trusted messengers, right? One great thing about the NAACP, it's 115 years old. It has been an institution, right? And so being a part of this organization, I have the opportunity to be a part of a plethora of Juneteenth festivals, a plethora of Freedom Fund dinners, things that folks already depend on and are engaged in both socially and politically, right? Where people who know them on the ground, know where their aunties, uncles, grandmas, grandpas live, right? Are already engaging with them on a day-to-day basis because these are people who are trusted in their community. And what I try to galvanize my young people to think about more so, what's more important than having, you know, myself or a big name or a big celebrity speaker to come to your campus and speak to young people is who are those micro influencers on campus who already pop in, the people who are already engaging, the people that folks are already following and want to know what's up. Work with those people, educate those people, make sure they have the right resources so that you're already engaging in something that isn't transactional, but something that they're already engaging with on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent, excellent answer. I have another question. I want to bring this to you, Tiyale. It says, when it comes to community education, what suggestions do you have for an organization that does not have many Black people holding power at the top, trying to get Black people involved in their efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question, because many of us face that in many parts of the country. And I say, one, lean on your partners to be that voice. I think go back to some of those insights that we shared around creating safe space for learning. How do we create trusted voices we can partner with? And how do we, more importantly, talk about to Kimberly's point, if I'm playing the long game and I don't see myself in this space now, I couldn't see that in the 1960s as sheriff, but I do see myself in alderman. Like then be really thoughtful about where you're seeing your impact. And I want us to do something differently as a community. And I think that we're getting better at it, but we're not doing it consistently across all levels. And I'm going to share an example from the LGBTQ+ community. There's a very specific reason why PrEP is so available and so free to everyone in the country now. And it's so accessible because it was lobbied and campaigned for and asked and demanded in elections before they went in. And then candidates were held accountable to making sure that community, which they saw something that was killing that community, they demanded something different for, and they got that. But what that came down to was having a very clear and clean ask, right? And I think that 42 million people is hard to get one set of asks for 42 million people because we're all different and we all want different things. But I think at a local level, you can get really tight on what it is that we're asking for. What are we demanding? What are we rallying behind so that it doesn't feel so abstract? It feels really, really concrete. And then that will always rally people out to say, if we are signing up so that we can fix this problem in our community, and we're getting that, and not just putting it out on social media, we're getting it in front of the candidates in spaces and places that matter, and demanding that as a part of our value proposition. Then I believe that's one of the ways you can get engagement to actually turn out, and you can get people to engage in the process and drive turnout, even though they may not feel like the big system they can fix or impact.
Thank you so much for that. That was great. You wanted to jump in on that question, Joe?
Yeah, if I may. Thank you, my brother. So I think it's a great question. And it's a constant struggle for organizations who either don't have a very diverse group of staff, or, insert problems here, right? But I applaud you for that question and the initiative. I'll give you 5 practical ways that you can actually engage the Black community, right? First thing is build trust. You have to understand it's hard to build with someone unless they trust you. So you have to establish some genuine relationships. You have to be intentional with establishing some genuine relationships with Black community leaders, Black organizers, and organizations that cater and support Black communities to build trust and collaboration. The second thing you have to focus on is your programming, right? You have to ensure that the programs and initiatives that you have currently are inclusive. You have to make sure that they're culturally sensitive. You have to make sure that they're relevant to our community's needs, to Black community's needs and interests. Third thing is representation, right? You got to highlight and support the voices of Black staff, if you have any, or Black community members, or Black board members, or just Black folks who are connected to your organization and your organization's initiatives. Two more things. One last thing is, two more things. Listening sessions always work, right? You don't necessarily have to go big or go home. You can always start with focus groups and start small and host some listening sessions to really understand the concerns and questions, kind of like this forum, right, of the of the Black community. And last but not least, transparency. You're anonymous, so that's problematic, right? But you have to be transparent about your organization's efforts and the challenges that you're experiencing, diversifying your leadership, and you're just showing your commitment to change. So those are some practical ways that you can actually build relationships with the Black community and get us engaged.
On that same note, Joe, would you recommend, it's a question that says, how would you recommend a team of white canvassers engage with Black voters, especially among college students? Would you recommend that, or?
Yes, but, right? Or yes, and I'll say yes, and. So bring some brothers along and sisters along, okay? We're out there, right? Number one, you can even pay. And Delta's more specifically, right? Right. Bring some of us along, right? You don't necessarily have to do this on your own, and not necessarily volunteers. Pay to play, right? Hire us.
Yes.
The other thing too is, right? Don't just be like, hey, we need some volunteers. You might not get too many people, right? And be very intentional about what you're trying to do. Last but not least, you don't have to do this on your own, right? There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Collaborate with Black organizations. Like, you don't have to do this by yourself. Literally, set up some MOUs and some partnership agreements with Black organizations, redirect those resources to those organizations so they can actually do the work. That's one of the issues that we're seeing. I know one of the brothers mentioned that, a lot of the candidates show up 2 weeks before the election. Well, guess what? A lot of the funders do too, right? And they show up way too late, and then they blame us for not winning. Well, guess what? If you would have gave us some bread earlier on, we then would have trickled down. That's how the trickle down works. We then would have actually gone into action and move our people sooner. But when you start sending these delegates or these surrogates who may be influencers, but they won't influence you to get to the polls, right? They might influence you to buy their CD or buy their clothes or buy their makeup, but they won't influence you to get to the poll, and that's problematic, right? But be intentional about the partnerships that you're seeking, and ensure that you collaborate with folks who are already doing the work.
Thank you for that. And wisdom's right here. I mean, you could just holler at this brother. I mean, he's been doing this work, and somebody that would be a great resource. We have a question specifically for you, Kimberly. It says, you mentioned that politics has become pop culture, but can't we say the same thing for Juneteenth? As Black people, that Juneteenth has become political and pop culture. As Black people, isn't the responsibility of changing the world already on us?
Well, the answer to that would be yes. All of it is pop culture. Everything is at our fingertips now. So yes, it is pop culture, but that's why I said that we need to control the narrative. So it is on us now that it is in the national conversation. It is on us to educate people and to take them where we would like them to know about Juneteenth. And, in that space, and building on something that Tiyale said about getting involved in the process, this is something that is left out of these spirited conversations that we see on social media all the time, because people think just because you may be, anti, the far right or something like that, that Black people automatically love the Democrats. And I say that's not true. Like, someone says, like, well, why aren't we up in arms? And I'm like, who says we're not up in arms? A part of the process, I know a lot of Deltas, what we do is we meet with our legislators all the time. We have a annual legislative conference where we go to Capitol Hill. You can demand meetings with your legislators, with your local, your state representatives, your national representatives, your senators. You can weigh in on legislation that's coming up and say, I want you to vote this way on this bill because this is affecting my community. If it is something, because this also takes research, and it also takes work. We can't just, go back and forth on social media about our opinions. We need to take the time to dive in and really research the issue instead of just hearing talking points on cable news. We need to get into it and not just accept what we're hearing on cable news. You need to shut down anything that you know to be misinformation and say, okay, I'm going to look up into this bill. All of these bills have numbers assigned to it. You can look at the bill and see where it is in the Senate or in the House, and you can call your representative and say, I'm one of your constituents. I live in your district. I want you to vote like this. This is what's going on in my community. We are dying because there are chemicals being built right in our neighborhood. So on SB 292, you need to vote like this from your constituent. But I think people don't go that far. They just want to go back and forth on social media to feel like they're right, and they want people to validate their opinion. But one thing you cannot argue with is facts. So if you have the receipts and you show up, I mean, because I shut people down by saying, well, what do they ask, what have you done? I'm like, well, I'm meeting with my congressman on the 23rd. I've been to his office, local office and DC office. I called and I asked, shared with my community, call your legislator and tell them to vote this way on SB 292, because we need to do that. And that's how things happen. You ever heard of the Crown Act? Delta's pushed that through. We can't be sending our kids to school and getting them kicked out of school just because how they want to wear their hair. So what we did is we mobilized and said, you know what? We're going to get this legislated. We're going to make legislation that it is illegal to kick a Black child out of school just because the way their hair naturally grows out of their hair. So it's a matter of just doing the work. And we need to, in the space that, yes, it is all pop culture, we're going to be a part of that pop culture moment, and we're going to close that loop with research and work.
So we have to close. I mean, we're getting towards the end, unfortunately. I mean, it's like, when it gets lively, it's getting lively, the questions are popping, but we got to close out. And I do want to close with, Juneteenth is also Jubilee Day. So we want to close on a positive note of like, what's bringing you joy these days? So I want to start with you, Wisdom. Just like you said, it's a lot happening. And man, sometimes when you hit that social media and you see all of the crises happen all around the world that many people are organizing and mobilizing, including folks on this call right now, to push back against, in the midst of all that, like, what are some of the things that bring you joy?
One, thank you so much, Jasiri, for facilitating this conversation, being a great moderator here, making sure that we are connecting back to what we're all doing in our organizations. But really what's bringing me joy in this moment in time is truly all the young people who are mobilizing, who are asking tough questions, who are persisting forward, because it really is another opportunity to bring more organizers into the fold, right? I'm always thinking about ways in which we are increasing our capacity, increasing our opportunity to do the work that we've talked about doing. And so I'm really excited to see that. And, one thing that I can count on Gen Z to do is to be creative and be innovative and do it with some swag. So that's
definitely
bringing me joy.
Appreciate that. Tiyale, what's bringing you joy?
What's bringing me joy right now is I think this amazing movement on social of young people really forcing all of us to prioritize mental health and being really thoughtful about what I commend younger generations for really saying, you know what, it's too much. We need breaks, and then showing us how to do it. Like, y'all pop on a plane and go. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna pop on a plane and go somewhere too. So that is bringing me immense joy this summer of like just being inspired by everybody who's trying to take a minute to find some mental peace right now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Joe, what's bringing you joy, sir?
So a couple things. This right, see this kid right here?
Oh, come on now.
That's my 18-month-old son, Joseph Adonis. And what brings me joy is working like hell to make sure that we can create a future where he don't have to worry about the stuff that we have to, right? And so that brings me joy. He gives me the reason to wake up, reason to grind. The other thing that brings me joy is the potential for Black men to reclaim our crown, right? We have to take a page out of the our sister's page book, our sister's book. And the sisters did a masterful job last election, right? They didn't go in and say, yeah, we're going to vote. But they asked a critical question. We're going to vote, but what are you going to do in return? What are you going to give us in return for our votes? And not only did they say, what are we going to give us? They said, here's what we want. We want a VP. We want a Supreme Court justice. We want federal appointments. We want to make history with Black women all over the country. And they did that. They showed up and showed out. And Black men, this is our lunch counter moment. We have an opportunity to actually show up and show out and demand things that will drastically change the trajectory of our community. So that's what I'm excited about. That's what I'm excited about.
Thank you very much. Kimberly?
Okay, gladly. And Joe, since we pulling out pictures, this is what's bringing me joy. My niece and nephew. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, we can't see it
because of my filter, but well, my niece and you are bringing me joy. Also, what's bringing me joy is the fact that Black women continue to be consistent and work the strongest voting bloc. I'm bringing me joy is people like Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who is not allowing her piece to be messed with and speaking up for ourselves and just making progress. I mean, I'm hopeful, like, we do have this election coming up, but I am hopeful about people getting out, mobilizing, and just spreading the message and just trying to be kinder to each other. So I'm hopeful. And I'm joyful about, summertime, good weather, traveling like my good Hampton brother Tiyale said. And, yes, to getting flued out and just enjoying peace.
Absolutely. And shout out Jasmine as part of the Gen 10 cohort. This cohort as well.
And a Delta. Amen.
Oh, okay. And a Delta. Just briefly what's bringing me joy. I'm headed tomorrow to the Tribeca Film Festival. And was blessed to be part of a documentary called Following Harry, about, Harry Belafonte. And so it brings me joy to celebrate the life of somebody who did so much for our community, who put, over 90 years into, educating, and inspiring, and being active in our community. So that's bringing me joy. I'm looking forward to that. And of course, what brought us joy is y'all came and listened to us. It was an amazing panel. We got to do this again. I don't know if we're going to do a Juneteenth part 2 or a fall version of it. But we want to thank, Gen 10 for putting this together, and the other organizations that participated in it: NAACP, Black Men Vote, One Hood, BET, the Deltas. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like the Voltron, like the Black community, like coming together and saying, we trying to get our power and our liberation. So thank you for an inspiring conversation. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Next Gen for hosting us. Peace, y'all.